To be an effective angler, we need to make sure that we are proficient in a bunch of different lures and presentations. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Hi there, welcome to the Bass Fishing Life. I'm your host, Steve Rogers. Before we get into today's video, make sure that you hit that subscribe button and punch the notification bell. That way you'll get every video that we post on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Thank you so much. To be a proficient angler, we need to figure out or become masters of different types of lures and presentations. And that reminds me of a story. And as a matter of fact, it has to do with this guy right here. So this is actually a Denny Brauer Pro Model jig, 1/2 ounce. And you're probably thinking, holy cow, look at that color. The color is electric blue. I do believe that this color has since been discontinued, but I have a real fond memory with this particular color and bait right here. So let me go ahead and set up the scenario for you. So it was probably mid to late 90s, and Denny Brauer was absolutely crushing it on the Bassmaster Tour. And if you know anything about Denny whatsoever, if you've heard about him, you know that he is known as a jig fisherman. He is a jig angler. And this particular one is a jig that he designed, okay, this Pro Model jig. And he is super good at flipping and pitching and fishing this jig in all kinds of different scenarios. And I believe I was probably watching, back in that time period, was something called TNN Outdoors. I don't remember if it was on Saturday or Sunday mornings, but it had a block of fishing shows and hunting shows on there. And I don't remember what the name of the program was, but I was watching Denny fish this jig right here. Well, I too wanted to be a jig fisherman, but I didn't know anything about it. So when that episode finished, the next time I was in at our local tackle store, I went in there, and sure enough, they had the Pro Model jig, his signature jig, in a 1/2 ounce in electric blue. So what I do, I bought one. And then I decided I need to force myself to learn everything about this bait. You have to remember, the internet was still not really something that anglers were going to find information a whole lot at that time. YouTube wasn't around yet, and just even the amount of information online was really minimal. So I tried to figure out a way that I could force myself to become a better jig angler. And here's what I did. That particular summer, for 3 months, a jig is all I fished. Now, I had some other different colors and weights, you know, some black blues and crawfish, green pumpkins, those types of things. But the only bait that I fished was a jig. I learned how to cast it. I learned how to flip it. I learned how to pitch it. I learned how to put it up underneath docks. I learned how to fish wood with it, grass. I learned how to swim it back to the boat. And the most important thing that I learned that summer is I learned what a jig bite feels like. And the thing that's tough with a jig is a lot of times you don't feel the bite whatsoever. You just see the line twitch just a tiny, tiny bit. So I figured all of that out over that 3-month period. The jig is now one of my go-to baits. Now you may be saying, Steve, there is no way whatsoever that I'm going to give up 3 months of my summer and fish only one particular bait. And I don't blame you. I was a little bit crazy up here between the ears to do that, but it is something that I challenged myself to do, and it has really paid off for me literally because of that. But here's what I suggest. If you don't want to do the 3-month marathon bait session, I guess you could call what I did with this jig, is the next time that you're out on the water, and the fish are really biting. We all have those days when the fish are just slamming whatever it is that we're throwing. Take your rod, set it down, and then pick up another rod with the bait that you are trying to learn. If they are just hammering a wacky rig on a particular day, maybe that'd be a good time to pick up the jig. Or maybe try the Nico rig. If they're hitting the wacky rig really well, the Nico rig is probably going to work out. So when the fish are really, really biting, that is an excellent time to learn a new bait or learn a new presentation. So that's probably my number one tip for you as far as how in the world you can learn and gain confidence in a new bait. The other thing that you could possibly do is you could say, okay, the next 2 times that I'm going to go out, I'm going to try this particular bait, try this particular presentation, and that's all I'm going to fish all day long, even if it's not the best conditions for it. That is when you can really learn something, is when it's not the ideal conditions and it forces you to alter presentations, retrieve speeds, all of these little variables that can make a huge, huge difference. So you can either go ahead and do that, let's say the next 2-3 times out, try a particular bait and that's the only thing you're going to do. Or when the fish are really hitting, try something new so you can gain confidence quickly. When you get bit on a new lure, that's when your confidence just soars and you're willing to try it at other times as well. Now, going back to this particular bait right here, because I really put the time in on learning what a jig bite felt like and how to present it and gain confidence in this bait, a jig was responsible for my first check that I cashed at a tournament. It was at a regional event down on Bull Shoals Lake in northern Arkansas, and I was fishing a little 1/4 ounce jig at that particular time. It was a brown, I believe, trying to imitate crawfish. But I'll never forget where it was. I could probably take you right back to that exact point that I was fishing. It was shallow, about 1 foot to 18 inches of water, a nice solid thump. And because I had spent so much time practicing with a jig, I knew what that bite felt like, set the hook, brought it to the weigh-in stage, and it was responsible for my first tournament check. So thankful I spent the time learning how to fish one of these. Now, a jig has also been responsible for other checks that I have cashed as well. And matter of fact, on the Bassmaster Open Series, when I was fishing that, jig was definitely my money bait. So it literally had paid off for me by putting all that time in practice. So I hope that maybe these couple suggestions or challenges, I guess you could say, I'm kind of throwing the gauntlet down and challenging you to put more tools in your toolbox. So when you get these days that the conditions are less than ideal, and maybe it's a bluebird, day out, or you got high winds or a highly pressured lake, is you can be that angler in the boat that is consistently getting bites all day long. That is my hope for you. Now, please make sure that you go out and encourage someone today. You never know what a difference you're going to make in their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.